My name is Blake Morrison. I'm the Investigative Projects Editor at Reuters in New York. I'm going to talk about two projects that I was part of in my previous incarnation at USA Today. The first one was a look at air quality outside schools around the country. And what we did here was teamed with Johns Hopkins University to use sensors to go out and look at air quality outside 95 schools around the nation. We took a look using a variety of devices. The first and easiest was badges, and we kept those badges outside for 4 to 7 days in an effort to capture whatever volatile organic compounds might be in the air. The second was we used pumps to capture polycyclic organic compounds and metals. This was an effort to figure out if there were other types of chemicals that might be in the air that the badges would not capture. The third thing we did was we used a ultraviolet monitor device to look for another type of chemical that neither of the two other sensors were going to capture. Now, we did this by getting trained by the Johns Hopkins University folks, and part of the agreement we made with them, and this was our request, was that they tell us and teach us how to do it. What we did then is we went out and collected the samples, and then we used a protocol that they set up, shipped the samples back to them, and they told us not only what was in what we found, but what we found meant. Those two things were critical because we were essentially banking on the expertise of Johns Hopkins to help us support whatever it was we were going to find. There was certainly a journalistic risk involved in so much as there was the possibility we were going to go out and do this monitoring and not find anything or not find what we thought was there. And part of that risk involved the fact that the monitoring we were doing was certainly illustrative, but that was about it. In other words, it would show us over a given week what we thought was in the air, but there were many things that could affect it. Wind direction, for instance, weather conditions, or simply whether the industrial folks who were emitting these chemicals were actually working at top capacity at that moment in time. So there were certain risks involved in that. The second project that I want to mention real quick is a project that USA Today started when I was there and finished after I left, taking a look at lead in soil. This was a very ambitious project, also using sensors, and the effort here was to take a look at places where lead smelters once existed and were no longer. And the project was called Ghost Factories for a reason, and that is that neighborhoods in which these smelters existed didn't really know that the smelters had once been in there. They had been retired back in the 30s and 40s, but the issue was what remained in the soil was perhaps problematic. So again, we set up a protocol here, and we worked with a company that uses an XRF device, and this is simply a gun that looks something like a phaser in Star Trek that you put against the soil onto the ground, and you pull a trigger, and for 80 seconds it tells you the levels of metal that are in that soil, okay? We did a sophisticated sampling protocol here, again aided by experts at Tulane University who do lead sampling, and then we took a number of samples from the samples that we used the guns on, and we pulled that soil up and sent that to Tulane University for further analysis. The result of that project was pretty profound also. Red Hook Park in Brooklyn, for instance, was closed for a time because sampling there by USA Today showed that there was high levels of lead in the outfield soil of the ballparks. And in fact, some Little Leaguers were quite put out because one of their games got canceled. So let me tell you a couple of keys that I think are important when you undertake these things. The first is seek out expertise. Don't pretend that you know something better than people who do this for a living and know much better than you. The second reason I think expertise is very important here is it gives you protection. In other words, if you don't know this thing as well as someone else knows this thing, and they have a reputation at stake, their investment is equal to or greater than your own. That's part of the reason we partnered with public institutions like Johns Hopkins University, for instance. The second thing is don't overrepresent what you found. We were very careful to use this as an illustration. In other words, it became a bully pulpit for us to say, if we found this and we're just journalists, why isn't the government doing more to find out what's really there? How come they're not going about it? The third is be transparent. That's one of the best things and most important things. It limits the arguments that others can make against whatever you find. They can look at what you've done, they can assess what you've done, and it gives them an ability to comment instructively on it and makes the argument substantive rather than about methodology. I'm going to turn it over to the balloon woman. Liz, all yours.